The Meiji Restoration stands as one of the most profound political, social, and economic transformations in modern world history. Between the mid 19th century and the early 20th century, Japan underwent a radical reordering of its institutions, social hierarchy, and relationship with the wider world. The Restoration, conventionally dated to 1868, was not a single event but a prolonged revolutionary process that dismantled the Tokugawa shogunate, restored imperial rule under Emperor Meiji, and rapidly transformed Japan from a feudal, agrarian society into a centralized, industrialized nation state. Its roots lay in both internal pressures and external shocks, and its consequences reshaped East Asia and the global balance of power. For over 2 centuries prior to the Meiji Restoration, Japan had been governed by the Tokugawa shogunate, established by Tokugawa Ieyasu after his victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 and formalized in 1603. The Tokugawa system was characterized by political decentralization under a rigidly hierarchical social order. Power rested with the shogun in Edo, modern Tokyo, while the emperor in Kyoto remained a largely symbolic figure. Society was divided into four hereditary estates: samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants, while the daimyo ruled their respective domains, or the Han, under the shogun's authority. From the 1630s onward, the Tokugawa regime implemented the policy of sakoku, or national seclusion, limiting foreign trade primarily to the Dutch and Chinese at Nagasaki. This long peace, lasting roughly from 1600 to 1850, fostered economic growth, urbanization, and cultural development, particularly in Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto. However, it also produced structural weaknesses. Samurai stipends were fixed in rice and increasingly inadequate in a monetized economy, while merchants accumulated wealth but lacked political power. Peasant unrest grew more frequent in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, with notable uprisings such as the Great Tenpo famine, lasting from 1833 to 1837, which exposed the regime's inability to manage economic crises. Intellectual currents such as kokugaku, or national learning, associated with scholars like Moturi Norinaga, emphasized reverence for the emperor and ancient Japanese traditions, subtly undermining the legitimacy of the shogunate. The decisive shock to the Tokugawa order came from abroad. On 8th of July 1853, Commodore Matthew C. Perry of the United States Navy arrived in Edo Bay with 4 warships, demanding the opening of Japanese ports to American trade. Perry returned in February 1854, and on 31st of March 1854, the Tokugawa government signed the Treaty of Kanagawa, opening the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate. This was followed by the Harris Treaty of 1858, negotiated by Townsend Harris, which granted extraterritorial rights to foreigners and fixed low import tariffs. Similar unequal treaties were soon imposed by Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands. These agreements provoked widespread opposition within Japan. The slogan, Son no Joi, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, became a rallying cry among anti-shogunate forces, particularly in the southwestern domains of Satsuma, what is modern Kagoshima, Choshu, modern Yamaguchi, Tosa, modern Kochi, and Hizen, modern Saga. Leaders such as Saigo Takamori, Okubo Toshimichi, Kido Takayoshi, and Ito Hirobumi emerged as key figures in the growing movement against Tokugawa rule. On 3rd of January 1868, the new government proclaimed the restoration of imperial rule, marking the beginning of the Meiji era. Emperor Meiji, born Mutsuhito in 1852, became the symbolic and ideological center of the new state. One of the first acts of the government was the promulgation of the Charter Oath on 6th of April 1868, which promised deliberative assemblies, social mobility, and the pursuit of knowledge from around the world. Although vague, the Charter Oath signaled a decisive break with the Tokugawa past. The early Meiji leadership moved swiftly to dismantle the feudal system. Between 1869 and 1871, the daimyo were persuaded or compelled to return their lands to the emperor in a process known as Hanseki Hokan. In August 1871, the domains were formally abolished and replaced with centrally administered prefectures or Heihan Shiken. Samurai stipends were gradually commuted into government bonds, and in 1876, the wearing of swords was prohibited, symbolically ending samurai privilege. In November 1867, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the 15th and last shogun, formally resigned his position and returned governing authority to the emperor in a move known as Taisei Hokan. However, tensions escalated into open conflict in January 1868 with the outbreak of the Boshin War. The imperial forces, claiming to act in the name of Emperor Meiji, defeated shogunal troops at the Battle of Toba Fushimi, 27 to 31st of January 1868. By May 1868, Edo surrendered peacefully, and by June 1869, the last Tokugawa loyalists were defeated at Hakodate in Hokkaido. The crisis deepened after the death of Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu in 1858 and the accession of Tokugawa Iemochi. Political instability intensified, and violent incidents multiplied, including the assassination of Lee Naosuke, the Tairo or chief minister, in the Sakuradamon incident of 24th of March 1860. By the mid-1860s, the shogunate faced military challenges from rebellious domains. In 1866, Satsuma and Choshu formed a secret alliance, brokered by Sakamoto Ryoma, aimed at overthrowing the Tokugawa regime. Military reform was a cornerstone of the new state. In 1873, universal conscription was introduced, creating a national army modeled on European forces, particularly the Prussian system. This reform provoked resistance among former samurai, culminating in several uprisings, most notably the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Saigo Takamori. The rebellion was crushed by the imperial army, demonstrating the supremacy of the modern state over the old warrior elite. Centralization was accompanied by institutional reform. In 1871 to 1873, the Iwakura mission, led by Iwakura Tomomi and including Ito Hirobumi, Okubo Toshimichi, and Kido Takayoshi, traveled to the United States and Europe to study Western political systems, industry, and education. The mission failed to revise the unequal treaties but profoundly influenced Japan's modernization strategy. Economic transformation followed. The government invested heavily in infrastructure, building railways such as the Tokyo-Yokohama line, opened in 1872, and establishing telegraph networks, shipyards, and factories. The land tax reform of 1873 converted traditional rice taxes into monetary payments based on land value, providing the state with a stable revenue base. Although this reform burdened many peasants, it underwrote industrialization. By the 1880s and 1890s, the government began selling state enterprises to private entrepreneurs, contributing to the rise of powerful business conglomerates known as Zaibatsu, including Mitsubishi under Iwasaki Yataro. Political modernization culminated in the promulgation of the Meiji Constitution on 11th of February 1889. Drafted under the leadership of Ito Hirobumi and influenced by the Prussian constitutional model, the constitution established a constitutional monarchy in which sovereignty resided with the emperor. The imperial diet consisting of a House of Peers and an elected House of Representatives, was inaugurated in 1890, though real power remained concentrated in the oligarchy known as the Genro. Japan's transformation had profound international consequences. Military and industrial strength enabled Japan to challenge established powers. The First Sino-Japanese War, lasting from 1894 to 1895, ended with Japan's victory and the Treaty of Shimonoseki, through which Japan gained Taiwan and influence over Korea. A decade later, Japan defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, securing recognition as a great power with the Treaty of Portsmouth. These victories shocked the world and inspired nationalist movements across Asia. By the time of Emperor Meiji's death on 30th of July 1912, Japan had been irrevocably transformed. Its population had grown, literacy rates were high, heavy industry was expanding, and Japan stood as a major imperial power. The Meiji Restoration was thus not merely a change of rulers but a revolutionary reconstitution of the Japanese state and society. It forged the foundations of modern Japan, for better and for worse, setting the stage for both its remarkable achievements and its tragic conflicts in the 20th century.